I hold this person very dear every time I think of Toastmasters, because he has been here every meeting, every year after year. He's always one of the first ones to jump up and participate. At this point, I would like to introduce Mr. Patrick Frazier.
Woo woo!
A Big Mac from Mr. Patrick Frazier.
All right, so I want to ask for one volunteer real quick. Come on. Okay, Nadia. Even though I'm competing against her, come up for a minute. And what I want you to do, Nadia, is take these handouts and go actually back to where you sat, but hand them out to someone on the other side of the room, because this room is the global marketplace. So go ahead and go to the other side of the room and hand those out. And I'm obviously the personification of the U.S. economy, right? So that being the case, now if I were to ask you a question, like what is the reason, why trade? Why would a country want to trade? Like when Honda was started, well, when Honda first entered the global market and started selling their Super Cub in Europe, it was because they saw a niche in the market, the fact that the average German, upwardly mobile German citizen would go from a bicycle to a bicycle with a clip-on motor, and then to a moped, and then to a bubble car, and then to a standard car. But the motorcycle was missing from that evolution. So what he did was invented a motorcycle that was so robust you could sell it in multiple markets. And then when they went to the United States, they thought they'd sell something more beefy to compete with the Harley Davidson. But then their marketing team said, well, everybody's really impressed by the Super Cub that we ride around in San Francisco at our base. Why don't we just sell that instead? And the great advertising agency, some Mad Men in the 1960s, I guess, said, here's our advertising slogan: we meet the nicest people on a Honda. And they were fulfilling a niche, being as the standard stereotype of a motorcycle rider at that time was a Harley Davidson kind of Hell's Angel person. And suddenly now you have this totally different demographic that Honda was able to appeal to. Then BMW, a German company, saw that their market in Europe was so saturated, the only way they could continue to sell cars was to go to the United States, which is me, right? So then they could sell more cars, open up more doors. And if I were to pay you to hand out these past handouts over at the GSR, how many of you would do it for 5 cents an hour? I don't have any takers, really. How many of you would do it for $5 an hour? Okay, so we just established a labor market. And how many of you would do it for $20 an hour? Okay, see? Okay, I don't know if you can include that on your loan application or not. Anyway, then here's another question. What color would you like your refrigerator to be?
White.
White, okay. Most people do white. Some people in India, because they have smaller living rooms, would actually like a bright color as a status symbol. You might have a smaller living room in some areas. Speaking of India, what do you call the Big Mac in India?
Mac Big.
Pardon my pronunciation, but the Maharaja Mac. And I'm sure there's going to be multiple answers for this, but what do you call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
Royale.
Yes.
What?
Yes, exactly. Royale with cheese, because they don't have the metric system. So you make adjustments. The Big Mac has a different name in India because they don't make it from beef, owing to the large Hindu population. They're not going to make a hamburger out of beef. And then there's no metric system, so they're not going to call something a quarter pounder, completely different name. But you still have a Big Mac as a really great symbol, a really great metric, let's say, for a consumer market of goods, like the CPI, for example. And The Economist magazine came up with the idea of the Big Mac index. And I'm sure all of you are thinking, that looks like Goodwill Hunting or something, but it's actually pretty simple. All it is using the Big Mac in, say, the United States as the numerator, right? And then the denominator is the foreign price of the Big Mac, right? So I was looking at this online on the Economist to try to refresh my exchange rate knowledge, since it had been a while since I took the class. And they had a problem that's on the handout about how, well, they didn't have a problem, but they expressed the fact that the Big Mac was trading for about $2.77. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what was the actual price in the in the Chinese yuan? And all you would do is a little bit of algebra and flip it around, and you basically would divide it by the 479, which was the price of the Big Mac in the United States. That's the numerator. The denominator is now the 277, and then you figure out the fact that it was selling for about $1.73. Big deal, right? And then you could do some similar algebraic manipulation and figure out that the exchange rate at the time was about $1.61, more or less. And the fact is that the Big Mac index as applied to China showed that there was an undervaluation of the Chinese yuan by about 42%. So why does that matter? Well, if you do that right, like Toyota did in the 1970s, you have arbitrage, and you can actually make more money by selling your goods in a foreign country if you do your Big Mac index correctly. Speaking of which, how many, if you had to choose between having a strong dollar or a weak dollar, how many of you would choose a strong dollar for the United States of America?
Strong dollar.
And how many of you would choose a weak dollar for the United States of America? Well, the reason why you might want to do a weak dollar is the fact that you're going to trade more goods, more people are going to buy your stuff. If your dollar doesn't go as far, you can actually sell more exports. And the reason why that's important is this other funny equation. It's basically just saying the trade balance, like the trade balance we have, can get exponentially high if you never ever have exports. It'll just go up and up and up and up. And since the Republicans don't want to raise taxes and the Democrats don't want to cut spending, the only other place you get money is by selling more stuff abroad. That's the only way you can do it. Now, that doesn't mean that a perpetually weak dollar is a good thing. In fact, outside of this kind of ebb and flow of exchange rates, it smells a lot like inflation. But you know what? If I remember something a former supervisor told me, that a wolf runs on its legs, that's true, and we just have to remember that it's the head that holds the fangs in place. So a culture of experimentation is just the kind of innovation we can all sink our teeth into.
All right.